Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for our morning panel discussion, Building Utah, to explore how Utah's growth is affecting residential and commercial development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our moderator, Chairman of Colliers International, Brandon Fugal, and panel members, Mitch Dansie from Deseret Color, Alan Matheson, Point of the Mountains State Land Authority, Michelle McConkie, SITLA, and Eli Mills, CBRE.
Well, it's great to be with all of you. What an incredible venue. This is my first conference here in this new Hyatt Regency facility after touring countless times during construction. Felt like this was under construction for 15 years. A long time coming, but what an incredible time to have a world-class convention hotel and an opportunity to address growth and economic development in Utah with this esteemed group of panelists today. So we're going to dive right in and try to address these topics. And I think before we get into the questions, I think for the audience's information, why don't you give a quick introduction on who you are, what you're doing in the development community right now.
Sure. So my name is Mitch Dansie. I'm with GWC Capital. We have projects ranging from Idaho down to St. George, Utah. Desert Color, a master plan community in southern Utah, is one of our largest. We have about 27,000 lots that we're working through between Boise and St. George. And so we're a land planning and development company.
I'm Alan Matheson with the Point of the Mountains State Land Authority, which is the entity that the legislature created to oversee the redevelopment of the Draper prison site. So you'll be seeing demolition start at that site within the next couple of weeks, and from there hoping to build a community that we can all be proud of.
I'm Michelle McConkie. I work for the State School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration. We are a state agency that has about 3.5 million acres of land spread throughout the state. Largely, we have a lot in Washington County. Desert Color is one of our projects that we've worked on with Mitch and with others. And we have a lot of real estate development, again, Washington County, but Utah County and throughout the state.
My name is Eli Mills with CBRE. I'm in the capital market side of CBRE. About a week and a half ago, though, I'm transitioning from brokerage, so I'm a recovering broker. I'm now the Chief Investment Officer of the Gardner Group, a development group here in Salt Lake City. And so I can talk brokerage, and I'm starting to be able to talk development a little better than I could before. By the way, I know we're not here to plug Desert Color, but if you have not seen it, it is fantastic. It's just a fantastic project down there.
Yeah, it's jaw-dropping. It's really transformed southern Utah, that whole area surrounding the new airport. Wow.
A lot of growth.
So as we dive in, I mean, everyone here in this room has been watching the dramatic hikes in interest rates. I mean, the most, I think, pronounced hikes since the 80s in order to try to stave off inflation. That coupled with home prices being elevated like never before in the history of Utah are creating some interesting dynamics in our development community and I think plans for growth. I'd like to ask our panelists, what do you think the impact of interest rates and home pricing will have on growth? Will it slow things down? Will we continue unabated? I'd love to hear your perspectives.
Guess I'll jump in real quick from a residential perspective. So I think what you're seeing is exactly what you mentioned, Brandon, with rates at highs that we haven't seen in a long time. And you saw Salt Lake and the Wasatch Front and really all of Utah and the Intermountain West see home appreciation just skyrocket, sometimes 50, 70% in particular areas. So you are seeing construction costs come down. You are seeing other factors that are helping, but those two are going to slow things. Nobody has a crystal ball. I think we look at it and say we're probably going to be in this for a little bit. Fed hasn't shown any signs of slowing down. I think we'll see interest rates and rates in general continue to come up a little bit. So I think we're going to be in this for a little bit. It's a great time to rethink, reposition, strategies, because we haven't been able to catch our breath for the last couple of years. And so I think it's healthy from a planning perspective to make sure that we, rethink everything and make sure we're doing it correctly.
I think I just agree with that last statement. So we've been working on this project at the Point and planning it for a number of years, thinking through markets, the economy, and now things are less certain. And so I think the watchword is flexibility. And so I think on one hand, you can be really optimistic and say, by the time we get to development, things will all work out and the timing will be great. But certainly that's not guaranteed. So we're trying to think of ways that maybe we get started with what we were planning, but be ready to transition into differences in the sectors that we focus on.
Michelle?
With the rising interest rates, it certainly doesn't help with affordability for first-time home buyers. And so we do anticipate that that will potentially exacerbate the problem. Whether or not prices come down, again, crystal ball, I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen. But along with what Mitch has said, one of our big focuses is looking at making sure that we're doing really good planning over the next few years so that we're ready if we do have a decline, so that we're ready for the next uptick, because even if there is a decline, we're certain there will be an uptick. So making sure we're looking at how we can do the best communities possible in the future for whenever that's ready.
A couple of things. So when interest rates go up the way they are and inflation is as bad as it is, development projects are a lot harder to justify. And so as my role at the Gardner Company, we're looking at each one of them saying which one makes sense, what has to change for it to make sense. We have 40 projects that we can break ground on in the near future. And so it's a matter of looking at it and saying, okay, a lot of them don't make sense today, right? The other dynamic, though, is that we have in the marketplace right now, when interest rates went up the way they did, the affordability of single-family homes went down significantly. About 90% of the renters in our apartments right now cannot afford the median price home with the interest rates where they are. So what that means then is that we have all of these apartments that are going to need to fulfill the need as we have homes formed and household formation continues. And so household formation will slow down, but at the same time there's still a need, and with growth to continue at all, even just our own kids that are growing up and getting married. I have 2 kids getting married the next 2 months. They need a place, and so we have to accommodate that growth, right? The good news on that front is and I was trying to pull up a slide real quick, but didn't pull it up quickly enough. There's about 14,000 multifamily units under construction right now in Salt Lake County. I can't remember the total number in Davis and Weber and Utah County, but they're higher than they've ever been. And so a lot of that product coming online, even with the market slowing, it's what will fill the need, because with interest rates as high as they are. In fact, I think it's when we looked at the median home price with interest rates from where they were a year ago to today, the rent went, their mortgage would have gone up $1,700 a month. So that just tells you it's becoming much and much more difficult right now in the current situation. So luckily there's a lot of multifamily coming online, but that does affect our growth overall.
Are we still in the midst of a housing crisis? Based on would you say we are still in the midst of a housing crisis?
It's a lot less. By the way, if anybody wants some slides, feel free to email me. I just did before going to Gardner Group, and I still am at CBRE just transitioning, we did a big presentation to most of the developers for multifamily and said, here's what's coming, here's what's been done, and then here's where we are. And what you'll find in the slides is the housing crisis has gone down significantly. And with household formation slowing down, that will also help. And so then it goes more into affordable housing and different sectors, which is not a discussion for today, but certainly an element of what we look at.
With growth comes a lot of challenges, congestion being one of them. We're seeing some pinch points along our major transportation arterials. I'd like to hear from our panelists what role do mass transit solutions play, and how are we going to address congestion in the future from a development community standpoint?
I'll take a stab at that. Concerns with growth are real, and I think they're changing in our community. Surveys that were done 5-7 years ago, people thought growth was a good thing. It brings opportunity. Increasingly, we're seeing the opposite. concerns for what growth means for congestion and for air quality and for water, et cetera. So I was talking to the director of the Department of Transportation recently, and he said, if our population is going to continue to grow at this rate and double in the next 30 years in the Wasatch Front, do people expect that we'll build a doubling of the roads that we see now? No, of course not. It's just not an option. So we've got to look at different solutions. One of them is the patterns of growth. We need to grow, frankly, more compactly so that we don't have to rely as much on transportation system and driving. Transit is going to be a big part of it. We're going to have to get out of our cars a little bit, and I know that the legislature is looking at significant investments in transit over the years, because it's the only way we're going to be able to get around in this narrow neck of land that we have with topographical constraints on it. We're not going to build our way out of it through roads. So maybe I'll just make one quick point on that. As we're designing the Point of the Mountain project, we're trying to create what we call a one-car community, meaning maybe a place where you need a car for that weekend trip or somebody in the household who commutes. But beyond that, we're looking to develop a 15-minute city where you can access the things you need within a 15-minute walk. And to serve that, we've got high-quality transit coming through, internal circulators that will take people within a 5-minute walk of any place on the site, mobility hubs where you can get a scooter, an electric bike, and get around, apps that'll help you understand what the options are to get from here to there, what the cost is, how much time each of those options will take you. And so as we start to look at the future, we realize we're not going to be able to rely on everybody driving singly in a vehicle. We're going to have to look at different approaches.
Anyone else?
Well, along with what Alan said, planning, we're currently negotiating a new about 1,200-acre development in Saratoga Springs in Utah County, and that is one of the things that we're working with the developer to talk about, is that transportation options, so that you have other options than just, as Alan said, getting in a car and driving. So that's a big focus, and really planning those future paths of development, and making sure that there are different ways that people can get where they need to go.
A couple other things. Right now, the state is starting to appropriate money to double track commuter rail. And that's important, and that will make a big difference because it's a lot more efficient, it's quicker, you have more cars coming, and then it's easier to use, right? And so that's an important part of what occurs. I think also taking tracks to other parts of the valley are important. And I think you're going to start to see nodes of office. You already see it now, but you'll see nodes where office collects around different stops with transit stops, because it's just so convenient and so easy to attract people to come in and work there and not have to deal with the commutes that are there. Another thing I think that is coming, and I hope it comes sooner versus later, and I hope we lead out in the state of Utah in this, is that if you have an electric car that has the ability to drive on its own, that technology still has a little ways to go, but it's getting very close. And so I think we should embrace electric cars being able to drive, make it legal, and then also not only that, support the system to happen, because electric cars are a lot quicker and a lot faster if we allow them to communicate with each other, and then you can have I-15 go much faster. And so I think that's a technology. I can't wait until the day when I can plug into my car. I want to go down to St. George and see, and then just go in the back and take a nap or watch, work probably, actually. Go in the back of my car.
You'll still have to deal with that one person driving 55 in the fast lane, though, right?
That's true, but I think my car can do that. I'm going to let my car do that.
That should be against the law.
It should be. There's another thing we should try and push, right?
Go.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? We don't have this is going to take everybody coming to the table to fix really this transit. With more transit-oriented development, it takes business owners, it takes community leaders, municipalities, developers. Everybody is going to have to come and put their ideas together. It can't be something where I'm going to sit back and wait for someone else to solve that problem, or I'm going to leave that to the municipalities or that city or that developer. it takes everyone in this room to say we have to fix it. Let's come up with a plan that works for businesses, that is smart, embracing efficiency and the future and things like that. But it does. It's going to take people in this room are the ones that are going to make that change, and speaking up and being a part of the conversation rather than letting it happen without them having a voice.
And I'll just add something. Technology is going to be part of it, and I think certainly the automation. UDOT's looked at it, and you can get almost double the number of cars on our existing infrastructure and move them faster if they're automated. But the other thing they're looking at carefully is aerial vehicles. And that sounds a little Jetson-y, but they're actually working on not just the technology, but the regulation to make it happen. And as we're developing our site, we're saying we better be building parking garages with flat roofs so that there's a place for them to land and take off. So it's probably not as far away as sometimes we think.
I've had multiple people, it's happening out west, that idea of being able to use different automated transit systems like that, it's out there.
I really like the ideas, your technology ideas. That's a much cooler answer than master planning. But I think it also just takes a general change in attitudes. And I know I'm guilty of it. I live in the suburbs. I commute into Salt Lake. I'm often alone in the car. And I think having more ranges of options. There's not a great bus system where I live, and that's a problem. I have Front Runner close to my house, but no bus system. And so I think a change of attitudes, and as Mitch said, also willing to open our minds and try some different things.
I think we are seeing a little bit of a change in attitude. I don't know about everyone here in the audience, but I've seen a little bit of a demographic shift in my own family. My two oldest children waited like years to get their driver's licenses. Having a driver's license and an automobile did not hold the same priority for them and their generation right now that it did for me. I mean, for me, it was freedom. I mean, the day I had my it just seems insane that anyone would wait. But it's not a priority. And I think using mass transit and ride sharing and approaching these things, the good thing is I think the demographic shifts that we're seeing will hopefully help alleviate some of that. But do you think rapid bus rapid transit, is that a solution, or do we need to push for more light rail? And where does that funding come from in the future before we step off the congestion and the transportation topic? What are your thoughts?
All the above. I mean, I think we've got to look at a range of technologies. Now, bus rapid transit is essentially light rail on rubber tires, but it means a lot of different things to different people. And so it's everything from kind of a traditional bus system to dedicated rights of way, signal prioritization, vehicles that you step right onto that feel like light rail. So the experience is very much the same as light rail, but it's much less expensive. So in certain places that makes more sense. Light rail may make sense in other areas. And frankly, as we think about economic development at our site, a lot of the Fortune 50 companies we're talking to expect an investment in permanent transportation infrastructure like rail, and so that it can add some value. But over time, it's putting the right technology in the right place to solve the individual problems we face. Funding is always going to be a challenge. I think the legislature has some money this next year. They're hoping, seed some of these transit projects. Over the long run, if we're not looking to solve all the issues with roads, maybe some of that funding transfers from roads into transit, but that's always going to be a challenge.
Anyone else? I can't believe light rail isn't into Utah County. Here you have really the fastest growing area along the Wasatch Front will exceed the size of Salt Lake County over the course of the next 2 decades, give or take. And I think continuing light rail into the county, they own all the right-of-way. It'll be interesting to see if bus rapid transit ends up being really the prevailing solution long-term, or whether there is some funding mandate or some resource that comes. But I don't know how the rest of the audience feels, but I can't imagine. And I don't think executive talent is accustomed to riding a bus. They are accustomed to coming from other urban centers and riding the rail. But try getting an executive to take a bus, and it's tough. And again, we're talking about patterns that exist currently that would have to be overcome. What trends have we seen in other larger cities, other larger markets that we have not yet seen in Utah that we can perhaps expect? Does anyone have any ideas as you've looked at the larger landscape of the United States and what we may see in the future here in Utah?
I think Utah is still behind when it comes to what we would call a traditional master plan community, a community that has diverse housing options. Our growth, you have seen areas where, well, this is the townhome houses, and here's the condos, and you drive down the road, and there's the starter homes. And I think the idea of bringing all of that together, we have a few communities here that are working. Some of them are in the top 25 in the country, and so it's being accepted. But you're going to see more of that master planned idea, and it takes developers, again, and municipalities working together. You can't do that on a 20-acre infill project, right? It has to be done at a larger level, and then incorporating the ideas that we've talked about. Transit-oriented development's a big thing. I think it is going to come to Utah County. There's a lot of great projects out there that are being targeted, specifically along the I-15 corridor, where that will be able to help with that. But I still think that we are behind in the Wasatch Front when it comes to true master planning. Part of that is our land situation, but as big landholders open up opportunities, it's creating a true plan with diverse housing and diverse opportunities, and so I think we're a little bit behind.
Well, maybe building on that concept, we love our single-family neighborhoods here and homes, and I do too. I've got one. Other communities, you're seeing a more rapid reduction in lot sizes than we are here. Part of it's the size of our homes, part of it's kind of culture and history. But I think what's going to drive change here is the demographics. We talked about different attitudes of young people, and convenience is becoming a much stronger driver than privacy and space, maybe. And so I think we're seeing a lot of the younger generation wanting to live in places where they don't have to take care of a yard, where they can easily walk to a coffee shop or grab lunch, where they can spend more time on recreation than mowing the lawn or whatever it is. But I think all of those things, plus the affordability piece, are going to continue to drive us towards some smaller lots. The other, opportunity there is 2/3 of our water use, residential water use, is used on landscaping. So as we build a little more compactly, we're going to use much less water per capita, and that's going to help us with another challenge we have.
Really quick, an interesting story about that is, so I was at Goldman Sachs when they first came here, and I was there for 11 years. And I watched that demographic, when you talk about it changing, come in. And I remember the first time one of the people I worked with was putting in turf. And I was like, that's crazy. Here we are 14 years later, my whole house is turf. And I'm telling you, it's the best thing I've ever done. And my 14-year-old boys love that they don't have to mow the lawn on Saturday mornings. But we have to change that, and that's what's coming in. You're seeing the smaller homes. People want to, the home buyers that you're seeing, they want to come home, they want to jump on their mountain bike, and they want to go and do something, and they want that convenience. And so it's adapting, right? We're adapting our planning, smaller homes, less maintenance, and being more efficient, and really it creates a better quality of life. You just have to be okay having those type of homes and driving up to an estate home. And the communities here are proving that they're okay with that. You can still have estate homes, starter homes, townhomes, all in one project through good planning, good architecture, maintaining high standards, and they'll accept it, and people will do it. Sorry, Michelle.
No, you're fine. I was going to say, you often hear people say, we don't want to be California. But if we don't incorporate some of these changes, and if you just build roads and have these large lots that are not having other housing options, that does become what Utah is heading towards. So I know that's a fear of a lot of people. And so I would agree, and I also agree that some of the attitudes, I have young adult children who, I think for my generation at least, having a single family home was sort of, that's how you know you had made it in the world. And that's not necessarily, I will tell you, I have one child who wants nothing to do with that sort of lifestyle and wants the convenience and these other options. So I think that is something we have to plan for and we have to look at.
Maybe I'd just say, it's not government telling people what they should live in. It's allowing people more choices to respond to the market.
So a couple things we see that are kind of fun and interesting to see. So especially this applies to Salt Lake County. We're becoming a lot more infill, and so we are seeing repurposing of projects or tearing down of projects, most of which have happened from out-of-staters coming into our market, looking at our market and saying, wait a minute, you see that as a Class B, 3-story office building. I see that as a fantastic 5/2 or wrap product in a really cool location. And so we're starting to see that, and you'll start to see that more and more. As I think about the projects where that's occurred, most of them have been out-of-state investors coming in and doing it, or out-of-state developers, and a number of the local developers have caught on to it and are doing that as well. And so that's something that we will see more and more of. Also, if you look at the other markets who have rail the way we have rail, you'll see nodes where you have tons and tons of housing around a node where you have a station, and then you'll see nodes where you have a ton of office around it, because it's so easy to live here, work there, get on rail, need fewer cars, and to cut your commute. And as we become more and more congested, you'll start to see that happen more, to where even some of the properties that are around these stations, you look at them and think, yeah, that's a good building, but there's a much higher and better use, and the land's worth more than the building. And so we're starting to see that a lot more, and it's a trend I think you'll continue to see occur. And so those are a couple of things to, I think, watch for that we're starting to see and you'll see more and more of.
Yeah, it's interesting. For the first time in 30 years, I've been getting questions from out-of-state developers and investors asking about adaptive reuse, but most importantly, what office buildings may be available to convert to residential, which is so strange.
And Hines is doing that on the South Temple Tower.
Yeah.
They kicked out all the office tenants. I have a project right now, and again, I'm transitioning over to the Gardner Company, so my team is now taking over on it, but we're looking at converting it to student housing and kicking out all the office tenants and converting it to student housing, because the University of Utah needs student housing, and there's nowhere to put it. And so you look at this office building and think, this is a great office building, but when you really look at it, you say, yeah, but it's worth a lot more as student housing, and at the basis we can buy it at and do it, you can actually turn it into student housing, which fulfills a great need and also helps an office market that at the current time is struggling, which I think 3 to 5 years from now we won't have enough office. But for now, everyone's kicking it in the teeth and keeps kicking it while it's down. But here in the near future, I think we'll be thinking, oh, darn, we should have kept building.
Yeah, what Eli is referencing.
That's another day.
The 136 South Tower, it used to be called the University Club Building, right next to the Alta Club here downtown, is being converted into all residential, which 5 to 10 years ago would have been unheard of. To take one of our most prominent downtown high-rises and convert it into residential, I don't think anyone would have anticipated that, and it's a reality. And it's actually quite brilliant. It's a great solution right now with the scarcity, relative scarcity downtown, and the office market is going to have some challenge for the next couple of years as people are trying to deal with new approaches to workspace, remote working, and the impact that has had on everything. So it's going to be interesting. That's a very prominent example of converting an office building into residential.
Yeah, you're even seeing it in other markets, not so much here yet, but it's coming, is even the repurposing of old long-term hotel solutions, right? So a long-term residence hotel, converting that into attainable, housing, trying to do it that way as well. And so those projects are happening. I think I saw the other day there was one in Utah, and I'm seeing a lot of it back east, but it's coming this way.
It's funny, your comment about turf, using turf, again, something that would have been kind of unheard of to a degree. Interesting, useless fact, I'm full of those typically. Disneyland, I just went to Disneyland recently, 2 weekends ago, and they've replaced all of the grass. So all of the grass at the entrance to Disneyland and in all of the other areas, including surrounding the Haunted Mansion, are all now turf. That's dramatic change. And I asked the guide, I said, what really motivated this? And they said it's water conservation, maintenance, and they thought it was a more responsible way of addressing it and taking them into the future. So it's interesting you bring that up, because that's something that I saw in a place where I wouldn't have anticipated seeing it. Areas of growth. It's no secret that the Wasatch Front is a very narrow development corridor. You have the mountains on one side, the lakes on the other, and we really do have a scarcity being created. Where is the growth going? So as you're seeing in your various positions, land planning and development, where is that growth going to be accommodated in the future along the Wasatch Front? And is that also going to filter out into rural Utah? Curious to hear your thoughts.
So I live in St. George. I moved down there for the Desert Color Project, and we've seen, St. George is very similar to what we're seeing here. But the projects that we're looking at, the Wasatch Back area continues to grow. There's going to be a lot of focus to people want that lifestyle. They want to be able to have, it's still, you can get from there to the Salt Lake Airport faster than you can in Denver, which has almost unlimited property and that. So I think the Wasatch Back, and I think it's just going to be denser products, but you are seeing it grow. You look at Cedar City, right? Again, who would have known that Iron County and Cedar City would be one of the fastest growing areas in the country? It's going to slow down a little bit now, but when things were really moving, that's what people were looking for, and I think a lot of that driver was affordability as well, because the areas that we're used to were becoming very difficult for first-time home buyers and people to build in. So I think you're going to see that continue to spread into some of those rural areas, but you're going to see a lot of redevelopment, repurposing, because there's still something about being in, in a major metropolitan hub or urban area.
I think the Gardner Policy Institute and others that have looked at trends have suggested that Utah County is going to absorb a lot of the growth, and a lot of it on the west side of Utah Lake. In fact, the projection is that, I can't remember the exact year, but like 2040 or so, there will be as many people in Utah County as there are in Salt Lake County, and there will be as many people on the west side of Utah Lake as there currently are on the east side of Utah Lake.
Is it because they're more righteous down there, or what?
That's why.
No.
Okay.
It is not. I'm a Utah fan.
I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But
Just
so
asking.
a lot of growth going down there, and that has implications, of course, for our transportation system and future, including looking at ways to get people across the lake. But I agree. I think a lot of it's going to be infill. There's still a lot of undeveloped land, undeveloped opportunity within the currently developed areas of Salt Lake County, and so I think we're going to continue to see going up rather than out.
I concur, really. Utah County, we have we have a very large development in Eagle Mountain that has been thriving for 6 or 7 years now. As I mentioned before, we're also working on a large one in Saratoga Springs. That's going to be a big place. Outside the Wasatch Front, of course, but Washington County has been the fastest growing county in the nation for, a decade or so now. So, and it's hard to know with the switch with COVID and a lot of people moving to more rural areas if that will increase, and if the, working from home, and if with the governor's initiative to try to make broadband more readily available, that may have an effect as well in some of the more rural areas.
I think you're going to start to see southern Utah County has a lot of apartments planned. In fact, when I first saw it, I thought, oh my heavens, is it out here? And the Gardner Group, with some other developers, developed one in Payson years ago. And when they first did it, we all kind of looked at it and thought, what's going to happen? And it filled up immediately. And we sold it for them back when I was at CBRE. We sold it for them. And I thought to myself, let's do a tenant, let's go and find out where all these tenants are coming from. And I was sure they were going to be coming from Provo, and it was going to be students. all of them came from Payson, all of them. It was just an undersupplied market, and as soon as somebody built quality product, they just ran to it. And so now there are a number of other projects that have been successful in Payson. Santaquin, I have some kids that own a townhome in Santaquin. When they wanted to buy a place in Santaquin, I had to look up on the map where it was. And then, of course, I've been there multiple times since, and Santaquin is doing quite well and growing significantly. And so I also think you watch Tooele, because Tooele is not that far off and not that far out of Salt Lake County, and you have I-80 that goes out to it. And then if you look at northern Ogden, we just sold, how many? We just sold like $100 million in townhome product in northern Ogden. And it's vibrant, and it's doing extremely well. And when you really look at the commute, once you get past Bountiful and, in that area, you can shoot out there. And so the commute's not that much further than it may be in other areas. And so I think we're going to start to see these outlying pockets where it's the next closest place for a commute to still get back into the core, really thrive and grow, and we're starting to see signs of that now.
There's a lot of planning going on in that southern Utah County area, specifically around transit-oriented development, because they recognize that they have to be able, if you're going to put that many people there, they have to be able to move up the corridor. But that is an area that there's a lot of focus on.
I heard they're actually now looking at moving commuter rail out to Payson, like moving it all the way to Payson. And so that's starting. You're seeing that growth occur. And if you do have commuter rail out there, then you can get down to Silicon Slope, or up to Silicon Slopes from there, right? You can get up to Silicon Slopes, probably 20, 30 minutes. You just hit the commute time. It all makes sense. And then all of a sudden, that community is going to be very vibrant out there, right? Or more so than it is now. It'll continue to grow.
Well, you have the new station that had its opening at Vineyard, a Vineyard station that it will kick off, I think, thousands of new residential units, commercial, right in the heart of the valley. And it's the intermodal hub. But in Salt Lake County, and one project I feel is noteworthy, Daybreak. You have Larry H. Miller Real Estate that sold the Jazz and is transitioned and bought Daybreak, and has been engaged in a very dynamic master planning process that will further transform the southwest quadrant. It's going to be pretty dynamic. Have you guys seen some of that planning?
I was actually going to say Larry H. Miller Group is the group we're working with in the Saratoga Springs project, and so we're excited about, we have a lot of the people who work at Daybreak who are working on that.
And we would have never imagined several 100,000 square feet of speculative office space built in Riverton off of Bangerter Highway between Bangerter and Mountain View corridor, but it's there. And it's surrounded by really the greatest concentration of restaurants outside of downtown in the valley. I mean, over 40 restaurants just opened in Riverton. Think about that. That one stat is a pretty noteworthy thing to look at as far as.
I was born and raised in Harriman, so I've seen it all.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
We've touched a bit on multifamily, but I'm curious, what trends do you see with density, with multifamily in the future? Are there going to be new approaches to addressing the multifamily development opportunities out there?
Anybody want to speak to it? I don't want to. Okay, so my team sells more multifamily than anyone in the state, so we've underwritten billions of this stuff and sold billions of this stuff. So what we're starting to see now more than ever is, in the past, it didn't make a lot of sense to actually go and do podium product in a suburban location because rents weren't high enough, and it was also difficult to do wrap product. We've seen a couple of projects start, and what that means, by the way, is it just means that you're densifying, right? You're building the parking either underneath the building, or you're building a parking structure and you're wrapping the apartments with it, so you can densify how many units you get within an acre, right? And so, but it's a very expensive build job in order to do it, and the rents didn't justify it. The rents are now starting to justify it, and what we're finding is that people that work out in Silicon Slopes and other areas, they want high-quality product, but it's not there. And when people build it, they're seeing they're coming. And so that's something you'll see, and a trend we're seeing right now. And I see we don't have a lot of time, Brandon, so I don't want to take any more of it, bud.
No worries. Really appreciate everyone and your participation. We're out of time, but I wanted to ask, is there any question from the audience before we conclude?
I'm Steve Asor. I'm a technology lawyer. I grew up in Utah, but I live
They're cutting edge. We're a little behind them. We do see some developers that are saying, look, we're going to put dens, or we're going to put areas where you can have an enjoyable, place to work in multifamily properties. So we are seeing a number of those. Some are also going the opposite way. They're building micro units, but then having multiple places within the building where you have the live work. In fact, Salt Development's doing one right now called, I think call it Salt Crossing. I blotched the name on it. We raised capital for them, but I can't remember the name of it. But it's right next to Fourth West. And that's micro units, but then with a lot of workspace in there so that you can go away from your micro unit and then go and have space there. So we are starting to see the trend, but not to the extent they're probably seeing it in New York City just yet.
We're still playing catch up. Well, let's give our panel a round of applause. Thank you. And